a good friend.
Hello. Welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. As a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions. I'm not here to slander anyone, and why don't we just get started? So today I want to continue that discussion that we were having on the DoorDash driver. And the video that I put out the other day got a tremendous response. Way more than I thought it would, to be very frank. But the discussions on there were outstanding. And there was a lot of comments and a lot of ideas. And I got to say, they really make you think. One thing that kept coming up over and over was just a straightforward explanation. You know, after the atrocity and they began investigating, it was a recurring thing that the DoorDash driver either came forward or was identified by law enforcement in the investigation, and a statement was taken, and that was it. They put it to the side, eliminated them as a suspect, and then later on, just covering their paper trail, they filed a warrant with Amazon, and that's why later on December 6th, they would start the Amazon warrant. Now that is a good, straightforward explanation, and I can buy that up to a certain point. Okay, I can buy that the DoorDash driver was identified fairly quickly and interviewed by law enforcement after the atrocity. However, the filing of the search warrant with DoorDash, how many days later? 23 days later, over 3 weeks later, just to verify a paper trail. That one I have a hard time contending with. Now, there was a lot of good comments and suggestions out there. What I want to do, though, is just try to keep this thing as close to the facts as I can and see if we can let the facts determine some things. Because one advantage that we have at this point that they didn't have when they were conducting the investigation on this case is we have the ability to look at everything in a historical manner. We can look at all the events that happened prior to and during and post the atrocity, and it's easier to determine what was going on, what was motivating certain decisions by the investigative team. It's easier to figure that out now when we plug it into a timeline than it would be for them trying to figure out what the next move was. And that's why, cold case detectives, they can solve some cases. I think the main issue with cold case detectives is they wait 20, 30, 40 years, and it's harder to put together the pieces in the timeline. I think if they'd wait about 2 years, it'd be much easier for them. That's just my opinion. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at the timeline, and we're going to plug in this new information on this DoorDash driver. It's not new information on the warrant, but it's just a different way to look at old information that I think was overlooked by a lot of people when these warrants first came out. And I've had people tell me, "Hey, Pavarotti, why are you drudging up old warrants and stuff like that? We've already had YouTube videos and we've discussed them and everything else." Well, I agree that you did. Probably discussed them at length. I don't know that you discussed them in the right perspective, though. See, I have a certain perspective on this case, and every rock that I turn over seems to back up my perspective. And you don't have 5 trillion documents and court hearings and witness testimony and everything else, discovery, and all of it be sealed and redacted on this case because you know everything about this case. You know absolutely nothing about this case because they haven't put anything out there. Been very good at hiding it on both sides. But it's going to start coming out. And when we look through the veil and we start to pick apart things, they can't hide it anymore. Once you get that information out there and it actually becomes part of the discussion, and believe me, they all listen to the discussions that are happening. And when you start to hit truth in those discussions, continuing to hide it will make them look very bad, and they know this. So let's go ahead and see if we can't just keep digging out some truth. So let's take a look at this. We'll go to this timeline that I have put together, and we're going to do this. Wait a minute, let's do this. Okay, so going back to this portion of our investigation timeline, we've got between December 2nd, when TF is arrested in Spokane on his absconding warrant, and between the 2nd and the 6th, he's actually transferred back to the Latah County Jail. Then, on December 6th, which, see, when I put it in this timeline, it starts to look interesting. Now, there may be a correlation, there may not. We don't know. But on December 6, 2022, that's when the warrant was filed with DoorDash. December 6th also was when the warrant was filed with Amazon. So between November 13th, the atrocity happens. We've got to assume that, very quickly after that they identified the DoorDash driver, got a statement from them, and for whatever reason eliminated them as a suspect. And it didn't come back up again until December 6th when they filed the warrants with Amazon and DoorDash. Now, I've got to think that for some reason, other information may have come to the forefront about the DoorDash driver that made them question their statement on the initial interview they had with them. And when they questioned that statement and they filed warrants with DoorDash and received those warrants back, well, their statements that they had questions about may have been verified. Now, here's the real question. There's been a lot of speculation, especially in the comments, that the DoorDash driver could have been Emma Bailey. Well, let me tell you, if Emma Bailey turns out to be the DoorDash driver, then this whole thing is all but done. Because that would mean... Let me just back up a little bit on Emma Bailey. I'm going to get off the facts of the timeline for a minute, but here's what I believe. And I've never once said anything about Demetrius Robinson, okay? And the reason I haven't is because I believe that he is a thug. Right, he's a thug. He doesn't have any merit in this case, in my opinion, whatsoever. He's just a thug. But that Emma, she gives off the vibe of she is a manipulative hustler. And there are certain young ladies out there that when they get in the mindset of they're using and they're hustling, they can be quite devilish. So while I believe that she could play a big part in this, I've never once said Demetrius does. I think he's an outlier. He's just a thug. And he certainly isn't going to go unalive people in a fashion like we see here at the atrocity. I mean, if he was going to do it, he'd use a gun. And he'd get caught real quick afterwards because he's not that bright, I don't think. He's a thug. But Emma, on the other hand, I think she's the key to this thing. And if she turns out to be that DoorDash driver, like a lot of the comments in my last video suggests, then it would be all but over. The reason I say that is because they found a drawing of the house very early on in the investigation outside the house. A lot of y'all probably remember that, and I've got some other information on that. But somebody would have provided that drawing. And if you take, like my good guy, A.R. Hayes, as he goes through and he was talking about how a criminal would plan out something like this, I think he's spot on. The only thing that I disagree with him on is how much knowledge that he would need to have about the individuals, the house, and everything in it to be able to pull it off. I think that knowledge can be gained from an inside source, like an Emma Bailey. She would know everything that somebody would need to know to set this thing up. She could provide a drawing. If she turns out to be the DoorDash driver, then you can bet the DoorDash was some way involved in this investigation. And the right reason that I say that is because when I look at this timeline, and we can see when TF is brought back to Latol on the 6th, that's when all of a sudden these warrants are starting to be filed. TF could have given some information on that DoorDash driver because he would know what happened in this atrocity because he's directly either involved himself or he was directly involved in setting it up. There's no doubt. So he could have given information on the DoorDash driver, which would have then had law enforcement actually file that warrant. Also file that warrant with Amazon, and you can see how the dominoes start to fall after that. But I won't get into too much more of that in this one, as I've got quite a bit more as I get into this timeline that I'm going to be getting into here let me get out of this real soon. But as of right now, I just want to keep this talk just strictly centered on the DoorDash driver. But I'm thinking by looking at this that something came to light, and that's why they filed those warrants for DoorDash. Now here's the second part to that. And people for some reason get this confused. They really do believe that Ann Taylor has access to all this information. They're just sealing it from us, the public. If that was the case, then she wouldn't have to file these motions to compel the discovery. Okay? You see, these items that are under discovery protection from the prosecution, when you see 32G1 and 16G2, those are things that they are claiming protection on, protection of information from discovery, not just from our eyes, but from the defense's eyes as well. So as it pertains to this DoorDash driver, you see Ann Taylor's going to have all the discovery on the interviews that were conducted with this DoorDash driver, especially if they're going to be called as a witness in this case. So she can go off of the information in the interviews, but I'm sure what she would like to be able to do is verify that information that the DoorDash driver is given in the interviews. And if I'm correct, looking at the way these warrants are being filed, there's discrepancies in what the DoorDash driver said in the interview and more than likely what they found when they got the warrants back from DoorDash. And that's the thing. See, the prosecution is not wanting to give over the information that they got back from DoorDash because they're claiming protection under 32G1. That is something the defense team really needs. Don't go off of the statements of the DoorDash driver. Y'all need to keep filing for that motion to compel to get the information back from DoorDash and be able to look at it, because I think they're going to find something huge that could be used for the defense in this case. But that's just my opinion. But please post your thoughts, post your ideas, post your criticisms, post anything you'd like to post. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching and listening to me think out loud. I've got some stuff that I'm going to be putting out here very soon that I think you'll enjoy. Got some new stuff for you. But until then, Pavarotti is out.